If you're not a suspect and you have a respectable career, then your DNA wouldn't be considered for a murder clearance. This is a fallacious assertion. Most serial killers and mass murderers had respectable careers in professional, government, or skilled occupations, the majority of them. A respectable career is ignored by investigators and cops. It's a sad criteria to even point out, and it has no effect on things. Well, you're living in a... No, I'm not kidding. Accountant, real estate investor. Please look up who that was. Campaign volunteer. Republican Party? There's more than one, and they weren't just Republicans. A clearance holder at Fort Knox. Army combat medic. Store manager. Stockman at a store. Busboy. Korea Army vet. A decorated vet from another war. Postal worker. British cop. School teacher. A sports manager for a major team. Doctor. Building security tech. Medical worker. Farmer. Midwife. Handyman. Musician. Bartender. Forklift driver. And a med lab technician are specific list of jobs serial killers worked most of the time or just before a murder spree. Some of these you might decide are something else, but I could find one thing that was in common with most serial killers. The virtual mind-smashing majority of them were not unemployed, homeless people, etc. A general list of jobs serial killers work most or just before murder sprees includes the following, in no particular order, but it really is, based on what people perceive. Police officer, and in one case, an older case, working on the case. Security official. Military personnel. Religious official. Didn't bring that up on the top list because that's a rather obscure one, but it was a large-scale one. We're going for what job types. Aircraft machinist. Assembler. Shoemaker. Repair person in general. Forestry worker. Arborist, which is different than a forest worker. And yard work, general yard work laborer. Another completely unrelated one. Truck driver. Warehouse manager. Automobile upholsterer. Gas station attendant. And fucking Epstein. If you're not a suspect, everybody's a suspect if you can't find any evidence to point to anyone specific. If you have a respectable career, no one would check your DNA. All right, and again, this is in response, this one, to me saying, are you assuming a crime scene DNA is recoverable without voluntary sampling and would be easier to work with or easier to acquire or harder to acquire or harder to get a good sample from than testing a known someone you believe is guilty and publicly grabbing someone's publicly left around DNA you can get by just following them around and taking samples. You do not have to get someone's permission to prove that they're guilty. Saying I refuse to give a DNA sample is not legally going to prevent people from getting one, incidentally, by being able to do a few things. Making sure that it's a decent sample, or gathering hundreds of samples over the period of how many years from every one of these individuals. If you have someone locked in a jail cell and you suspect that they're guilty of something, you can get a DNA sample. The person made a statement that a certain individual is commenting in comment sections instead of just giving a DNA sample, and named someone's name. Because that made sense. This isn't witch hunting at all. You're presuming they didn't just unofficially get their DNA and disqualify them. The whole point is they have nobody that they've aimed at that's been, whatever. The other thing is, are you presuming that the crime scene has better DNA data to be able to confirm or deny someone? People want themselves to be right when they comment under my videos. I'm okay with that. But again, are you assuming a crime scene's DNA is more recoverable without voluntary sampling, with a person who's probably trying to hide their identity, more or less recoverable, more or less valid, more or less complete, than testing a known someone you can just follow around for a couple of years and wait for them to leave around DNA publicly? You can get it by following them around, or legally getting a no-knock warrant and just going in and getting samples. Do you know what parts of your life are the best to sample from? And I also posted a video about this on another channel, but I'm doing it here again because this person isn't answering the straight question with a straight answer. You're being evasive. Do you know that if you clean your house more, it makes better quality samples? It doesn't remove them. Watch the movie Gattaca. Exfoliating my skin is going to reduce it. Wearing certain types of creams and maybe even certain types of makeup or whatever, depending on male or female, it doesn't matter, or medical ointments, or just washing your hair with a certain shampoo may make you harder to identify, because it's not that you're not leaving anything behind, it's that what you're leaving behind is so generic nobody cares. I've had a job where my job was to literally, part of the job was to be as generic and easily ignored as possible. It was literally my job. And what I found out is one of the best ways to do it is to buy a cheap suit, launder it completely with the most commonly sold cleaning products possible, 2 of them, one after another, and then dry it out in the sun inside of a sealed bag so it's exposed to ultraviolet light, which kills off literally everything. And make sure you get the suit from a place that normally has pretty, unpleasant stuff in it. Cut out the tags. See also Joker, custom clothing, or did he just remove the tags? And make sure it's the most generic clothing possible. And have a whole collection of this stuff that is fashionably unfashionable, boring, everybody wears it. Don't wear an 80s outfit if you're not wanting to look like an 80s kid, and or a throwback. And you go into an area looking as generic as possible. And then after you use the suit, only one day after you've cleaned every square inch of your body, shaved everything completely clean everywhere, including those areas, and make sure you just got your hair done and cleaned up a week before, but have about a week of hair growth on your head and no hair growth on your face if you're male or female. And make sure you do nothing specific to you, but something very specific to the persona you're carrying. Learn, if you're a guy and want to be generic, to use makeup to cover up every single identifying mark on your body. Have no tattoos visible, or just don't get them. I thought of getting a mocha when I was younger. No, I'm not kidding about that. I even drew them at one time. I was an artist at that sort of thing, because I could do basic graphics. And I have no markings on my body. If I could get rid of every scar, I would, and I will someday. Because that way there's nothing to identify. Except for the damage to this part of my face and some other things you can only see with an x-ray, and currently you can still see very little of it because I'm progressively removing everything that shows up in an x-ray, whether I like it or not. Except for my teeth, my dental records. If I was dropped from orbit and burned up, but they could find pieces of me, identifying me would be impossible. In fact, if I was lost in a lake, they'd probably have no ability to find out who I was. I'm a generic, boring guy. That's the point. A murderer or a career criminal or an assassin is going to make themselves so generic and so difficult to identify in a lineup by looking like literally everybody that it makes it really impossible to track them. And one of those tricks is you make it to where there's nothing left behind that anybody would find different. You don't make it completely sterile except to make sure you leave very little of you behind. But other than that, you're done. Like, don't wear contact lenses, wear glasses. Make sure they're glasses you got by buying the lenses from a thrift shop and regrinding them. I don't know how to do that. I practice what I preach. I make my own damn glasses. Those are test lenses. Once they're smashed, there's literally no way to trace them back because it changes the shape enough that you can't identify what lab it came from. The frames I made, but they're made from cheap frames. What I would do, I would buy normal frames and plastic lenses that fit me that were blanks, cut them to fit, put them in, and they would be generic as hell, but not have any marks leading to any particular lens lab, and use really old frames on purpose. I wouldn't wear contacts, I never do, because contacts fall out and they become identifiable to you because of the tissue and cells. Don't wear a hat because you can drop it. Don't know if you know that, but a bridge guy was trying to prevent himself from being identified. He wouldn't wear a hat if he knew what he was doing. Have nothing you can drop. Carry real ID of yourself, but make sure you don't drop it. Make sure everything you're wearing is in good condition, but not brand new. Make sure it's been completely sterilized, yet it will leave fibers behind. Make sure it's something you would never wear. Or if you did wear it, it wouldn't be something you wear more than once. After you leave an area, no matter what it is you're doing, you're trying not to be traced to, burn all of it. Apply for a new ID. That way the ID isn't there either. Or leave the ID in your pocket. Make sure everything you have is bought that day or the week before, cleaned and sterilized and completely unrelated to you, but makes you look generic as hell for everywhere else. Make yourself generally also fit in and blend in. Don't clean your house so much that it makes it easier to find the DNA. Leave it a little bit messy. when you first move in, sterilize the hell out of it, right? No, because you want confusing DNA everywhere. If you're trying to be a James Bond type. You can look up the amateur James Bond book and it doesn't cover any of this because it wasn't known at the time. Just make yourself generic. Bridge guy isn't trying to be generic, I don't think. I mean, he does look generic if you look it up. It really is. That guy on the bridge is really boring looking if you actually compare it to everybody else that day. You can look up videos taken in 2017 in winter and see hundreds of people like that on the streets of New York and also in Indianapolis and all sorts of places. You can look up video that. I mean, I'd made a video about that a while ago. This is how everybody looks, and I could pick out like 10 people who look like Bridge Guy. People just avoid looking like that because they don't want to be yelled at in the street. Again, accountant and real estate investor Stephen Paddock is the United States' worst mass murderer and a mass shooting. Is an accountant and real estate investor. Donald Trump is a real estate investor and mogul. They had almost, some of the same characteristics. Campaign volunteer, maybe in the Republican Party or Democratic Party? No, it was both. There's one each, which is weird. Does anybody know that Lee Harvey Oswald was at one time just a political agitator who was also a military-trained marksman? Does anybody know that people don't like that because it makes them nervous, so they try to discredit it when he really did pass as marksman like everybody else has to if they're going to give him a long-range rifle and a scope, if they want a scope, which normally they didn't give him. You don't know what you're talking about. Anybody yelling, I don't know what I'm talking about, hasn't looked up the last 5 channels that got erased. Look, assuming someone isn't going to get DNA scanned when it can be done without them permission legally and used as evidence in court is screaming, I don't want to look up stuff. Or not. I mean, if you have a reason for this, I understand it. But this is, again, a person who's naming a name of somebody that they think is guilty. They want to be declared guilty. They want them thrown in prison. And ignoring that isn't going to work because it doesn't matter what you want. This is also the kind of person that says, well, a horrible thing happened, therefore must punish somebody. And that's why that doesn't work that way. And again, Bridge Guy may not have actually done it. Again, I keep poking people with that and they won't acknowledge it. So again, do you assume that a crime scene's DNA is recoverable without voluntary sampling, yet we don't have the ability to do that involuntarily from someone we can just keep following until we get good samples? This has been done experimentally enough times that I don't know why anybody would bring this up. And why did you avoid that by saying, well, what about some other unrelated thing? Why did you post this? Links below in the description, mostly archives to pages that were being very stubborn, and also this person's comments. Please do not harass them. Please understand this is a fallacy. Please stop it.